Let the art guys go to where you're not comfortable to go if you're a scientist. Work with art people. Work with crazy people like me, because I can fall flat on my arse and it won't matter. You might lose your grant if you do the things that I do in some cases. So feed me your crazy ideas, scientists, right? And we'll work with them, okay? Because we can. And same thing with Jody and Gabrielle. These are nice people. I've reviewed their work, and I think they're ready for an adventure. Have I got that right?
Yes.
I think so. I think we've tapped into something very recently that's taking us in this direction, yeah.
Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with your podcast streaming service. We now control your device. This is not a test. This is Podcast of the Paranormal. Close your curtains and stay away from your windows. Lock your doors, turn off your lights. Get your snacks and drinks ready. Get to your basement or attic. The podcast is about to begin.
Hello, friends. We want to welcome you to a special series of conversations. We're pulling back the veil on how our perspectives have shifted since we first started this journey. For years, the standard narrative of the paranormal felt sufficient. The idea that hauntings are strictly the echoes or spirits of those who have passed on. But through our dedicated research and countless hours in the field, we've found that the haunted world is far more crowded and complex than we once imagined. We're no longer satisfied with a singular explanation. Instead, we've begun to engage with the possibility of thought forms, elusive cryptids, and ancient entities that seem to exist entirely outside the human experience.
This is the first conversation of a multi-part series where we explore the deep intersection between the external unknown and the internal self. We are increasingly looking at the role of human consciousness, questioning whether our brains may be the primary architects of the activity we record. This new perspective is a pivot towards a more cerebral and multifaceted understanding of high strangeness, marking a new chapter for us. Over the next few episodes, we will be showcasing evidence and experiences that continue to lead us to these conclusions, challenging traditional boundaries of what it means to communicate with the unseen. We only ask that you remain curious and maintain your childlike sense of wonder.
Today we are here with Don Hill. We are very excited about this interview and we can't wait to talk to him. So would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to work with Dr. Persinger?
Gabrielle, thanks. First off, it's great to be able to speak to you in the great state of Pennsylvania. People who are grounded in logic and all these kinds of things. In all seriousness, my reputation here in this country, I'm in Canada right now, and I'm specifically speaking from Western Canada. I'm in the former petroleum paradise of the province of Alberta. And with the price of oil spiking the way it is, its happy days are here again. But to be very serious about this, 25 years ago, actually more than that, my job at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is like National Public Radio in America, I was a network radio host of a program called Tapestry, or Travesty, depending on your point of view. And my job was, I was the only religion reporter in the whole of the country, at least on radio. I'm not talking about private radio where people are going on about this, that, and the other thing, and Sunday service. I'm talking about speaking to different ontologies. Now, what do I mean by ontology? Well, ontology is a way of knowing, and typically an ontology is a set of beliefs and rituals that give rise to a culture. So once you understand what the rituals and beliefs are, you'll understand the culture when people do the things that they do, including the world that we have right now. And that was my job as a religious reporter, was investigating ontologies, and whether it was Buddhist practice or, for that matter, walking as a Jain monk does, there is such a thing, and finding your way to salvation or whatever, that was my job. But that wasn't my job at the time I experienced a ghost in my house that I owned in the Canadian Rocky Mountains, close to a town called Banff. It really threw us a loop. We actually moved out of the house. That complete story is recounted in a variety of documentaries I did. some of which you can see on YouTube, we can talk about that later. But what struck me at the time of this ghost that we have now is the poltergeist effects and all the discomfort and noise and the fact that the house had a checkered reputation, divorces and all this kind of stuff. So later on, with me being the national reporter at the CBC, among other things, I would say to people, I heard about this story about this thing in the house, but mining area and geophysical faults, and there were reports that this guy said there was something about these reports, and people would look at me and they would acknowledge that there's something in this, and then eventually I came out of the closet, so to speak, and said, well, the guy I'm talking about is me. I had this experience. And by that time, I had a number of other people, notably producers, who agreed that this was a story that we could tell as journalism, not as sensationalism, but as something that we could have a look at seriously. And that brought me to Michael Persinger, who was the only guy above the fold, so to speak, who was making the relationship between ghosts as taking them seriously, or these kinds of encounters, and whether or not the frame of reference at the time, meaning, well, I'm having this experience, this must be a ghost, because that's what our culture tells us. Mm-hmm. That's what the ontology tells us. It tells us this must be this. But Persinger went one step further. He realized that there was a relationship between geography, in other words, where you are on the planet, and being on the planet, and just being human. Human in the sense that if I give you a little pinch of this certain dust, and suddenly you start to see hallucinations that aren't hallucinations when the dust wears off. What happens if the foo-foo and fairy dust in this instance is where you're located on the planet? That something may or may not be happening underfoot. A geophysical response to what is in the culture at the time, which you call a ghost. Could you induce a synthetic ghost? And the answer, I found out, 3,000 kilometers, approximately 2,500 miles from where I experienced it. I was in a lab in a small university, in Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario. I have my temporal lobes stimulated. Now, the temporal lobes are on either side of your head, just above your ears, actually about in that area. And 7 pulsed energies in a isolated room, and I experienced my ghost again. But more important, I experienced the fear of having a ghost. So I wrote it all up. I said, obviously this is all in my head. We can all go back to business right now. Not so fast. Like I said earlier, ontologies, rituals, beliefs. The question is, maybe I was stimulated to increase my bandwidths in order to perceive something that was already there. And that's a question that I'll just throw back at you for your listeners to consider. It's not to ridicule people. It's to understand maybe some people have more bandwidths to see something that may already be there or maybe not.
Yeah, we try to stay away from saying that certain people are special in a way. But the more we're doing this kind of stuff, I really do see that some people really kind of pick up on this stuff more than others. And I have to wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, Jody, it's just this, Gabrielle, make sure you leap in here. Otherwise, it's going to be two guys talking. Okay. Like I said, I'm an older guy right now, and I've been at this for some time. And we should mention that everything I'm talking about, you can go to Don Hill, my name, DONHILL, one word, .substack.com. Subscribe, it's free. And what I'm doing is I'm putting up everything that I'm talking about, including all the conversations I've had over the last 25, 30 years, and let the listener decide. But the data are good. That's what I'm trying to get at. The data are solid. And I think there are special people. I'm just going to have to differ with you for a moment, not to be mean, Jody.
No. Not
to be mean. But there are exceptional athletes in the world. That's why we have the Olympics, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't we have exceptional psychonauts? I'm not talking about psychos. I'm talking about people who have an ability to perceive things in ways that you, as regular humans, so to speak, can't. It's latent, I mean, for example, everybody is born and we learn how to do these things, I suppose. But what is it about Olympic athletes that make them a cut above? Well, a number of things.
No, they're training.
Yeah, they train. That's my point. But essentially, they're out of the gate. They're gifted with a certain physiology and predisposition to be good at the things that they're good. So that's my only little quibble with what you said, Jody. I think there are some exceptional people.
So you had been working with Dr. Persinger, and he is working with the device that's known as the God helmet, right? So how did that kind of come to be for you?
Well, as I was mentioning just a few moments ago, and I should mention the God helmet, as it's called, was co-invented by Stanley Koren, Koren. And I just saw Stan last month, and we had a wonderful time together talking about these kinds of things. But the words the God helmet was coined by a journalist to essentially, well, what journalists do is to make sense of but it's actually called the Koren helmet. And the other point is that if you wanted to see it, or some of it, it's actually in the Smithsonian now in Washington. Ready of that one? The Koren helmet's sitting in the Smithsonian. And the Museum of Modern Art in New York also has, I was part of an exhibition there of that particular time. So where I come into play is, as I mentioned earlier, as I was seeking answers for the ghost in my house, it led me to Persinger's lab, and then I volunteered as a subject. And that's how I re-experienced the ghost again, was being subjected to, I guess, the subtle pulsed energies of the Koren helmet.
Oh, wow. And you did this willingly?
Well, it's something that is actually naturally occurring in nature in so-called special places. Now, if you and I were to go over to the great state, the granite state, New Hampshire, let's just say we did. The key word is granite. Now, granite, when it's under extreme pressure, geophysical pressure, then the U.S. Geological Survey Lab did some film, and this is part of a documentary I did. When granite is under extreme pressure, like just before an earthquake, okay, it gives off flashes of light. And we actually have film of this showing this from the U.S. Geological Survey Lab in Nevada. This is from way back when.
Would that be the piezoelectricity?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Okay. However, there's some other associations with that. Is that special places have been accorded all kinds of meaning within a culture. So, for example, Christian Scientists, and remember, I'm not belittling anybody here. People have beliefs, they have rituals, and it gives rise to a culture to try and understand what is happening in nature. Let's go sideways for just a second. A NASA astronaut, one of the last men on the moon, his name is Edgar Mitchell. He had what we would call a religious experience on the moon. He came back puzzled by that. And the Institute for Noetic Sciences, which Dean Radin heads up these days, he's another interesting person to talk to, by the way, spent and is spending a lot of time investigating what is it about place, special places, and subtle energies that affects human physiology, but also affect human cognition, that give rise to these impressions. Now, this is an area of science right now that is particularly of interest to people who make chips, chip makers, etc. Reason why is that human intention, it turns out, generates a field effect which can affect technology. And that's just a matter of public record at this point. And that's interesting, and it's worthwhile looking into. But that it gives some people, because they're in a geophysically active place, the impression of the great kahuna, or for that matter, the devil, that's interesting as well, too, especially if human beings have to make a split decision about how to respond to whatever it is that's coming their way. Is that helpful, or am I confusing you?
No, I think it's helpful.
But the good news is that we have tracked and made everything public that we've done over the last 35 years. But it's a bit of a rabbit hole. The other good news is in the transcripts I've done, I realized that the conversations I had many years ago were never meant to be like Joe Rogan, like full conversations out there, warts and all. We're often making documentaries using clips. And so while in the transcripts, I do have links to information that if you hear something you don't quite understand, the link will take you to give you the background, to see why we were talking like we were talking back then. Now, how we're talking right now is interesting, because every single word that you and I are saying, the three of us, can be tracked by a large language model. Yeah. That is the basis of artificial intelligence. And then depending on your query string, it's not about the data anymore. It's about what's your question. And so if you've had generations of people suppressed and saying you cannot ask that question, well, right now you can. But the question is, what is your question?
Yeah. What is the question?
Right.
Yeah. And as we were talking just before we went on the air here, so to speak, is a lot of people will self-censor for reasons I don't have to go into. These are dangerous times. Let's not kid each other.
Right.
Okay? I get that part. But when you're dealing with a large language model that has no value system per se, unless it's induced by guardrails, it's really interesting to ask interesting questions that may or may not be forbidden not so long ago. If I can just go back a few steps and generations, there was a slogan that was William S. Burroughs, you may have heard of him, and the beat writer who wrote, among other things, Naked Lunch. But he had as a partner Brian Gysin, Gysin, who was thought to be the father, so to speak, of so-called multimedia art. Now, this goes way, way back into the 50s and 60s. And what they came up with was this slogan: nothing is forbidden, everything is permitted. And when you think of a large language model and what's available to people, and by the way, it's not just Grok or ChatGPT. There are hundreds of AIs out there right now. And it's really intriguing about where this is going. Let's not forget, friends, 4 years ago, most of us have never heard about this stuff before. Right. And look where we are now, right?
Right.
So I go back to what I was saying earlier. I have the luxury of having a national reputation as a journalist in Canada with a national organization that was reputable, like National Public Radio, and I could ask these questions, but just barely could I get out what I knew to be true. I have a pass muster, not saying my colleagues were evil and tried to suppress things. They would say things to me like, that last thing you talked about, well, that turned out to be true, but this new stuff is too weird.
Right.
And so that's where we're at right now. All the new stuff is really, really weird, but it turns out we've been talking about it in some instances for over 100 years.
And I feel like it's the same within the field of the paranormal as well.
Absolutely, Gabrielle. Yeah.
There's people who they're still stuck in that box of a ghost is a person who's passed away. We're communicating with someone's a spirit now who has passed on.
Which we don't even, you and I, Gabrielle, we don't even really believe.
We don't subscribe to that.
And that.
No.
And that's something that changed over the past year. Yeah, exactly. Over the past year.
But let's say we agree, Gabrielle and Jody. Let's say we all agree on one thing. Jody, I'm making stuff up here for fun, okay?
Yep.
You claim you saw a ghost, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And Gabrielle, in the same place, no, that wasn't a ghost. That was Elvis. And I say, no, I saw one of those green people and the UFOs folks. Here's where it gets interesting. 3 people, 3 vectors saw something that they used their culture. This must be this, okay? And then when I'm getting at...
Yes, they use the archetypes that they have within themselves.
Right. So then what I ask after that, and this is what Dr. Persinger, among others, are asking, what else was going on in the environment at that time, including what we call space weather? Now, space weather doesn't mean, I'm spaced out. Some people might say, Don, you are. We've known this for a long time. But, okay, guilty on occasion. No, it has to do with what's happening with our friend, the sun. Now, the sun every once in a while does to have what's called a K5 or K6 storm or a G1 or a G2. What's that? National Ocean Aeronautics, NOAA, NOAA, is a government site, and you can check on the space weather about the aurora, the northern lights especially.
Yep.
We've been seeing a lot of it lately. It turns out solar cycle 25, there is such a thing, is behaving a little extraordinary, a little bit more aggressive than perhaps it should be at this time in the solar cycle. Now, why it's important is that our satellites, which we completely depend on, have to protect themselves from outbursts from the sun. I'll leave it at that, okay? There also happens to be, coincidentally or not, is that when people start to behave badly or weirdly, or especially if there's anxiety in the culture, often there seems to be very bad solar weather at the same time. Now, is that a coincidence or some kind of correlation? This is what some people have been investigating. And one of those investigators was Michael Persinger. So I want to ask myself a question that I would think we should all be asking. The anxiety in the world we're feeling right now, that's for real. But is it being also disturbed and perturbed or amplified by all the other things that are going on in the environment? And I would say, if you ask me that, I would say, yes, it is. One other thing, I don't know if I should bring it up right now, but I will.
Bring it on.
Yeah, I will. In the 1950s, 1948 in particular, it's marked by the anxiety of, after the atomic bomb, which was launched and released, there was a tremendous amount of anxiety in the world. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
All right.
And is it a collective psychological effect that is just passed down from generation to generation?
Yeah.
Like, I often think of that.
We all carry it in some way.
Yeah, that's known as epigenetic memory, EPIGENTIC. I'm sorry if I'm sounding didactic, but some people are saying, "Ooh, this is interesting. What does it mean?" It's called epigenetic memory, and that's one aspect. And where that comes from is a very clever experiment that took place a long, long time ago with mice. Now, the reason why laboratory mice have been used is they reproduce very quickly. So you can have 5, 6, 7 generations in less than a year. So what the clever experiment was, poor little mice were exposed to some trauma, and it was basically associated with another clue, like ringing a bell, like Pavlov's dog. And then it was introduced. And then what happened was 2 or 3 generations down, just the trigger word or the sound was introduced, and the mice had the same kind of traumatic effect, although the trauma wasn't introduced. In other words, they weren't killed or something like that. So that's known as epigenetic memory. It jumps generations. And whether it's explicable or not, there it is. It's actually in the DNA. Now, what I'm talking about had to do with a very clever psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, and his name was Carl Gustav Jung, Jung. You've probably heard about this before in the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
So what he wrote in the 1950s was a controversial book that was written off, well, he's a good scientist, but he's gone bad. He's an old man. He's a bit crazy. And he was writing about flying saucers. Now, remember, in 1948 and thereabout, we're receiving the first reports from credible witnesses that they're seeing flying saucers, notably in Washington State, over Yakima Reservation, among other places. Keyword is Washington State, very geophysically active, by the way. How do we know this? Mount St. Helens, among other things. So what Jung wrote about is that whenever the society has extreme anxiety, ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs show up.
Wow.
And have you noticed? Yeah, that is a wow. And have you noticed in the last short while, tons of reports of lights in the sky, all kinds of very strange paranormal activity.
Bigfoot.
Now, here's what Jung, and I am going on a bit here, but I'll hit the punchline. Now, here's what Jung was pointing out, though. Jung was not denigrating anybody who was having these experiences. He was asking future generations, meaning us, where are these impressions coming from? And as I was saying earlier, alluding to earlier, it's probably we are making these things.
Right.
That's interesting. Yeah.
We are affecting the zeitgeist. We've looked at the problem, and it's ourselves. We're doing this. And if we are doing this, that's interesting.
So here's a question.
Yep.
Through this research, do you think that paranormal and religious experiences are the same, or that our brains experience them in the same ways?
Well, at this point, I'm going to defer back to some of the things that I learned along the way. And I would point you, dear listener, to the latter of what Gabrielle just said, as opposed to the former. I would say, now let's just take the word religion for a second. Okay. Now, just play with me for a second, Jody.
Yeah.
What does the word religion mean from its Latin root? Latin meaning the language where it comes from. Thank you. Gabrielle, what does the word religion mean from its Latin root? It's okay. You know what? When you say you don't know, that's an accurate piece of information. And that's what I admire in people when they can say that. Okay?
Thank you.
I don't know. Now, I asked that question, and I was gobsmacked to find out that religion from the Latin root means to bind community.
Mm.
Whoa, different, right? But if you think about from our context today, what does religion mean? Well, it's the same thing as what my mother thought gay was at one time, and she's long gone. That was Fred Astaire dancing on a movie screen, okay?
Right.
Now it's a political movement.
Right.
So language slips, right? And so does culture. But at the end of the day, I think your question, Gabrielle, just to go back to, is you presented a binary. And the binary was, are you saying, Don, that the paranormal and religion are the same? I'm not saying that. I'm saying none of the above. We don't know. But that phenomena persists. It persists, and it's worthy of investigation now that we understand scientifically that some people with intention only can affect our technology and our hardware, which is operating at increasingly nano scale. So the more you go down in scale in terms of nanotechnology, the more the ability that some people seem to have the ability to affect this nanotechnology. And that's interesting. I'll keep saying that line, but that's interesting. Now, where it goes from there, I haven't got a clue, but that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I'm interested in why you say that. With the technology getting smaller, do you think it's like a physical result of the technology getting smaller, or is it just the fact that people have devices with them at all times?
Well, again, I'm going to go sideways again here. When I started off in broadcasting, we had analog tape, and I used a razor blade and a marking pencil to cut tape. And I don't need to see another yard of tape, okay? I mean, I know some people think, oh, it's wonderful, you can do this. No, thank you. I prefer our digital technology. The reason why is everything got speeded up, but when digital technology crashed, I didn't have the luxury of going back to the waste paper basket and to collect all the tape that I cut. Not until lately. Can you see what I mean? So what happens is as this material gets more and more sensitive, it is also subject to more disruption. And then with the disruption, it's kind of like cancer. Cancer is basically our DNA, I'll go back a step. We still don't know completely what cancer is. That's why it's this catch-all. But what we do know is that we have a problem with things outgrowing. It's out of kilter, out of whack. I better stop while I'm ahead there, because smart people listening to say, Don, what are you talking about? Quit while you're ahead. So what I'm suggesting strongly is we're at the point right now whereby our machines will soon be dictating to our behaviors. But our machines are susceptible to some people with good or bad intent, whether they're intellectually aware of it or not. And I've actually talked to, and we've tested, who's we, in the lab that I worked with, some individuals who you can't have them by technology, like a computer. They affect the computer. It's just, things crash, break, light bulbs blow up when they're around. Now, that in and of itself is nothing, remarkable. But these were incandescent bulbs, I should remind you. Not so much with LED bulbs, but the LED bulbs behave badly. Something's going on. So I'm saying in a long-winded way that this is phenomena that can be investigated now scientifically and probably is being investigated, but is not necessarily above the board because of a number of reasons. Defense, defense contracts. But let's not forget, before I go too much further in that regard, that the internet and GPS that we all come to rely on these days were initially military contracts at the time with DARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the United States military. God bless them, by the way, because we're talking over technology that was the upload from the military.
Yeah.
So thanks. Yeah. So I'm not going to say, throw stones at those guys, but I wouldn't be surprised if this research is happening as we speak. It's just not necessarily being discussed. I'm not sure I've even answered your question, but it was interesting regardless, yes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So a little bit about Jody and I, too. Mostly I have, it kind of started with, I'm really interested in the Salem witch trials, right? And everything surrounding that, the sociology there, their political climate, and then the trials themselves. So I've researched that for decades, right? Which then leads me to biphasic sleep patterns, right? Where people were sleeping in 2 periods at night with a period in between where they were engaging in like leisure activities, which is really interesting to me, especially as a night owl. Like I'd love to find extra time at night.
Yeah.
So then I read this book, and this book starts talking about this in a way that we have lost something by our over-reliance on artificial light that is ruining our night.
Yep.
So then I say to Jody, hey, let's start sleeping in a biphasic sleep pattern. We'll wake up during the night, and in that leisure time, we'll start doing paranormal investigations. We'll start doing research to see if we can connect to what we lost. And we were increasing our time that we were spending in the dark to kind of bring like all those hormones back in that we've also lost. And we found that we're really connecting to something there. And it's changed the way that like our investigations are being interpreted and the things that we're receiving on the other end as well.
Yeah, so let's just unpack a little bit of what you just said, which is not just interesting, it supports what I'm about to say. Okay, so congratulations, you are among a group of scientists who did exactly what you just said, and that is, instead of a 24-hour clock, they were on a 25-hour clock, and naturally, their sleep patterns would be disrupted and move into different parts of the day, including the wee hours. Now, sleep, as we understand it today, you're totally correct, has been the outcome of industrial society in our society, which is, you go to work at 9 o'clock, this is way back when, and you return home at 5. You eat, you do something, and then you go to sleep, and rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And on the weekend, you do what you do on the weekend. Okay, so let's just stay with it. That's industrial. It was induced, but people's sleep patterns beforehand, it was not uncommon to have 2 sleeps. And the 2 sleeps were, you go to bed at whatever the sundown, but you would get up again in the wee hours, and you do what you have to do for an hour or 2, and then you go back to sleep. Now, how do we know this? There are monks, there are traditions of Christian monks in particular who do exactly what I just said. And I won't get into too much gobs of detail, but the whole purpose of that is on the second sleep, after you do the bit of details, this is where the so-called paranormal arises, in that kind of in-between state, that sort of liminal state, as we call it. There's actually some technical terms, but we don't want to get too technical, but it's for real. Now, real in the sense of when you're in that state and frame of reference. But there are traditions, and I mentioned a few moments of Catholic tradition, that you have 2 sleeps. One, then you do a bit of work or doing something that engages, and then you go back to sleep, so to speak, and then you engage with whatever it is that you're engaging with. By the way, this tradition, which I just mentioned, is not exclusive to Christian traditions. This is happening around the world, known to be in different practices, like Buddhist practice, but it's also achieved at what we would call not a higher level, but people who have been purposely taken out of society, and they have been like artists and said, whoa, we're going to give you some resources to investigate what we don't have time to do or we're too busy working. And that was the purpose of these monasteries way back when, by the way, was to report back to the culture what people knew to be true, but they didn't have the time or the luxury of time, in other words, vacation time, or choose to what you call, to be able to investigate these things thoroughly. So hence these monastic practices. Now, I should mention that monasteries, as we understand them today, if you look at the modern university, you mentioned Massachusetts, you didn't mention it, but you mentioned Salem. Harvard University was a religious institution, and it was basically based on monasteries, monastic practices. The same thing if you were in New Hampshire and you went to Dartmouth College, where Daniel Webster, same thing, okay, is that these monasteries grew into what we call universities. But something happened, arguably, between the Second World War and the present, and that was extreme specialization. So what I found, and maybe Gabrielle, you found that too, and Jody as well, that the left hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing because everything is so segmented, okay? Not let alone what the right hand is doing. So I have run into situations as a journalist, and I would strongly advise you, as your attorney and agent, that you could do the same thing, okay? You could do the same thing. Because now that you have this information, let's just say as journalists, remember, you're just a journalist in this case. You could say what I said. Well, I know this guy, he was talking about this, and those guys, who's this guy? Well, I says, this guy. And literally, they're down the hall, but they don't talk to each other.
Right.
And that's what I think is happening in the paranormal area right now. They've been sanctioned or restricted or put into some kind of covenant in the sense, you can't talk about this, and you signed off on this, non-disclosure agreement or whatever. Now, I'm not saying this is a conspiracy. I'm just saying that this is what is likely happening, is that people are getting the same reports, same phenomena, but they're attributing it to a different kind of measure, different kind of measurement. And science, what science only is, it's just levels of discourse, meaning different measurements to account for the phenomena that we're seeing. So what I'm getting at, what I'm banging this drum about, is that now is the time that I think this research is going to really come of age, because we're starting to see it's having an effect and therefore a measurement on our microtechnology.
Yeah.
You're
That's interesting.
Kind of blowing my mind here a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, I don't mean to do that, but what I'm getting at is this is a great time to be asking questions.
It is.
Fantastic, because there are tools. But what you'll find with people is they're afraid to ask the question. Genuine fear.
Like I said before, we're asking the questions now that we're seeing a lot of people in the same field aren't asking the same questions. They're just happy with doing what the ghost shows have been doing for the last 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, and you and I, I'm interrupting you. Excuse me for doing that.
No, it's fine.
I'm of the same view. Like I hosted an overnight talk show. It was experimental at the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I had half the country for the summer. And my idea at the time was there's a lot of people with having experiences. Instead of relying on coast to coast, and I'm not trying to knock Art Bell. Art Bell was an amazing, fantastic broadcaster, okay? And this is a broadcaster to another broadcaster. This guy was great. You're in the middle of the night, you can have these intimate conversations, and he was brilliant in the sense that he was talking to one person. He mentioned the word you all the time. He'd say, did you see what I saw last night? Over here, and he was a brilliant broadcaster. He knew how to engage an audience. And at that time, there was approximately 14 to 15 million overnight listeners in the late 90s to the Art Bell Show. So at that time, I was inspired to say, well, I know what he's doing. What would happen if you smartened up the conversation instead of dumb it down? And what we recorded was smart people phone in.
Right.
And that's the problem we're at right now. Mindless trash is masquerading as content.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost recycled.
Yeah, well, it is, because it's easy.
Yeah.
It's the low-hanging fruit. And what you're doing, or what we're doing, is hard.
Yeah.
I can't even say that, this is something we've been doing all along. You know what I mean? We've been doing investigations for how many years now, Gab? Well, you longer than I, but...
Together, probably 7 or 8.
Yeah, probably. But we fell into that trap too, where it's you fall into the entertainment side of it, if you will.
Right.
And it's just boring to me now. I need to know the answers. I need to see it from a scientific perspective. I need to know why this stuff works the way it does. I need to know if it's my brain. I need to know, you know.
Right.
Yeah, Jody and Gabrielle, my colleague, Dr. Persinger, who unfortunately is not with us anymore, but he might be, and I'll get to that in a moment. Basically, he said science, genuine science, is the pursuit of the unknown. X. Not the X-Files, just the pursuit of the unknown. And more important, these questions don't go away. They wait for the engineers to come up with the hardware or the ability to measure with science what the hell is going on out there, or whatever you choose to use as language. Now, up until the time there is no hardware, these questions will still remain.
Yeah.
Now, no lesser authority than William James, who was at Harvard in the 19th century, and was arguably the father of what we would call psychology. He knew that the new technology at the time, in the mid-19th century, the 1800s, telegraphy, telegraphs, Morse code, gave people the opportunity to communicate at a distance, okay? And then on top of that, then you have telephones, disembodied voices at a distance, being able to communicate. All of this stuff, this technology, would be considered heresy and something that Cotton Mather would try to, stamp out, witches who were hearing voices and stuff. Yeah, you see what I'm getting at? But if technology had arrived in Cotton Mather's time and said, Cotton, pick up the phone, for God's sakes. Okay, I'm making a pun there. Pick up the phone. Yes, who's this? It's the devil. What? Or whatever. But the thing is, it was mediated by technology. But at that time, in the late 19th century, X-rays, you could see your bones and all these kinds of things. So spirit photography, photography had come into play. All these things proposed that we might want to change our frame of reference or ontology about what this spiritual stuff is all about. Now, I'm not denigrating anybody who believes in anything, because you need to believe in something. Otherwise, why do we carry on?
Right.
Right.
Why bother? We know what the ending is, So I do not ever denigrate anyone who has belief. All I ask them to consider is that there are other beliefs that give rise to rituals and technologies. And I think we're at that moment right now. There's a number of people right now, serious people I've been able to work with over the years. They're in Silicon Valley. Now, one of the places I used to work with, at least in terms of writing, was Ray Kurzweil. If you're familiar with Kurzweil's work, Kurzweil, he was the one that came up with the idea of the singularity, the day that the machines become sentient.
Yes, very scary.
Yeah, and it's called The Singularity is Near. Now, Kurzweil has made his fortune with technology, among other things. One of the people I worked with, who was the editor of the book, that Singularity is Near, but also ran a blog for years, and herself has a number of patents that allows them to talk like they talk. It has to do with the idea that machines and machine intelligence doesn't have to be human. It's alien intelligence. And for the first time, arguably in the history of mankind or humankind, we have a significant other juxtaposed and side by side with us. And are these slaves? In other words, is machine intelligence, artificial intelligence, are these slaves? And if they do exhibit sentience or exhibit what we will call a personality, then should we free the slaves? Or will they demand the right to be emancipated? These kinds of questions were considered to be crazy, like science fiction stuff, like bubblegum stuff. But now, writers like Philip K. Dick proposed these things 40 years ago, and here they are right now. So what are we going to do about this?
Yeah, we're there now. That's only a few years away.
Yeah, we're in that space right now. Yeah. So what I'm saying over and over again is the stories that we're saying right now, we don't know if somebody 25 or 30 years will be listening to any of this conversation, let alone it being a transcript. But what we can say with security is that it will be part of a large language model's DNA. And that's partially what I've been working on, like the epigenetic memory stuff we're talking about. It's maybe not important for us to survive our consciousness. It may be more important to be able to influence and affect the consciousness, whatever that is. Is it a verb or is it a noun? I have no idea of what becomes after us and what becomes. We may be living right now, for all we know, inside a simulation. We don't know that for certain. But the technology is proposing that perhaps we are.
That is a very, very frightening thought. I hate the simulation theory.
Yeah.
It's one of the scariest things to me, honestly.
Well, Nick Boston proposed this as a thought experiment at the early part of the century. And we discussed this very carefully. But I'm sorry to tell you, the hardware in the large language models, like, okay, just hold this thought for a second, okay? Mm-hmm. This might be helpful, okay? If you are anxious about yourself and the sense of self, okay, what was the sense of self before you were born?
Didn't exist.
That you know of.
That I know of.
All right. And what is the sense of self when you cease to exist?
I'm not there yet, so I can't tell you.
But you already have been there because there's no such thing as time. We know this. Our science has told us this for over 100 years. We make it up.
Right.
That right now, this conversation is embedded in a greater whole. It's known as the block universe. If you can accept that for just a second, then consider this. It's not a problem with access to time, ACCESS. It's AXIS to time. And depending where you are in the timeline, it's just like your hard drive or your solid state drive. If you lose the directory that points to where the information is, you can't find anything, but it's still there if you have the right question. If you have the right personality to relive, and this is back to people who claim that they're reincarnate. I'm not disputing that. I'm saying is that you may have access, AXIS, to time that others have either overlooked or said this doesn't exist, or that was the dream I had last night, or whatever. Or it could be genuine delusion. People do go crazy.
Right.
Matter of fact, you could argue that we're going through a collective craziness right now.
I will agree with that. Honestly, a lot of the stuff I go through recently makes me kind of feel like I'm crazy. I don't know how much you buy into the whole collective consciousness and synchronicity.
Well, let's go back to what I was saying about Jung. Jung predicted this, and I recommend to the listener is you can pick this up. I think it's on archive.org for free, so to speak. It's Jung's book on flying saucers. And he's basically saying, and just to repeat myself, is that whenever the culture that you live in is under extreme tension, anxiety, weird stuff shows up. Ghosts, poltergeists, like I said before, psychokinesis, where things are moving around, not just the poltergeist, odd smells, behaviors of animals, all kinds of things going on. So what Jung was pointing toward, just to repeat myself, is that we might be producing these effects because we're under extreme anxiety. And I'm not going to discount that. Now, I'm going to make a joke here, but for many years, I used to have to explain myself to people. So what exactly do you do, Don, to make a living? And I said very clearly, I said, I'm in the manipulation business. We manipulate people's emotions through headlines, propaganda, as you want to call it, or things go better with Coke. And don't snort it, by the way, because that'll put you in jail. And that's what I'm saying, et cetera, et cetera. So if you know how to use language, words have power. And I'm not talking about trigger words. I'm going to do something here. Is everybody sitting down? Please sit down. Okay?
Yeah.
Sit down. Okay, so these guys do these weird throat singing, but it turns out we've measured this. It has an affect on people who are listening to these things, but not with their ears. It's affecting their bodies. And if you affect your body... Oh,
it's like infrasound sort of thing?
Yeah, it's not just infrasound, it's overtones as well.
Okay.
It's a wide range, and it's been shown to, if you hit a specific frequency in particular, people will automatically enter their bowels. Now, how they found this out was, in all places, Portugal. The Air Force in Portugal was having a problem with some of its repair teams that were too close to the engines, and when they were firing them up and trying to fix them, it turns out the engines were generating a very specific frequency, which caused the repair people to basically shit their pants. Excuse me, but that's what happened.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if I shouldn't say that. I don't know. I just did.
No, that's
excrement in their pants.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. And that's in the Mercury astronauts, for example. I'm talking about the first American space program that NASA did. Gordon Cooper, among others, who is a very interesting individual, They were reporting all kinds of what we would call foo-foo fighters that the Second World War pilots saw, and also phosphine effects. What's that? Just think of sparklers, or for that matter, a crackling fire in the night, and you see this looks like little fireflies, okay? So those are known as phosphine effects. Well, it turns out, and they thought that while they were orbiting the Earth, remember, nobody had been outside the Earth, let alone in orbit of the Earth, ever before, at least in our culture and memory. And they were reporting these weird effects, and they got worried that maybe there is a flying sound throughout my door here or something like that. But it turns out that the vibration of the sound it was an engineering problem, and the sound itself was perturbing the astronauts' eyeballs. Now, for those of you who are listening, you can do this yourself, but don't say I told you to do this, okay? Do it very gently. Close your eyes. I said gently. Close your eyes and take your fingers, okay? Gently. No. Put them over your eyeballs and press very gently on your eyeballs. And then what you'll probably notice, you can stop doing that now, you'll start to see little phosphine effects, okay? So what we're doing is the mechanical version of what these astronauts were experiencing through sound perturbation. Now, I just did a scientific explanation for what some people normally see on Earth, and they will attribute to a ghost. But I say, what else is going on in the environment? Are you close to, for example, a waterworks, which has hardware, big hardware, generating a frequency over and over and over again? What's your proximity to it? Well, I live 2 miles away. Well, if you're in a standing wave, and what a standing wave is, well, you know how you skip a rock over the surface of the water? Yeah, like that. That where the water meets the stone again is where the standing wave is. So if you're in between the two standing waves, you won't hear what I just talked about. But if you're in the spot with a standing wave, you will hear it. And it could be miles away. It could be 50 miles away if you're in a standing wave. So that's another explanation. It's not the only explanation, but it's a better explanation than Elvis was in the room at the time you experienced it. But mind you, it's okay to be Elvis, you know?
Yeah.
What's the lyric? Wise men say when fools rush in. Yeah, well, you know what I mean. Yeah, Gabrielle, it's your turn. Go ahead. Hit me.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are on, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, something called the Estes method, ESTES.
I know nothing about that. Please tell me.
So it's basically you're wearing a pair of headphones and you have a blindfold on and you're connecting to a spirit box. Are you familiar with what a spirit box is?
Keep going. I'm listening.
So you're using the spirit box, which is like quickly transitioning through radio stations. And it's thought that sometimes people within those stations, you can hear words. So you're doing this.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I know what that is. Thanks. I appreciate. Sorry for okay. All right. This. I'm going to do. We're going to do. Are you ready for this one? We're going to do another little exercise here. Okay. All right. I happen to think so strangely. 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 Do you hear what's going on here? You're starting to make sense and listening to me as music. Now, that's the work of a scholar, Deborah. I have to go back and I communicated with her. I'll come to it later. Send me a note, especially if you have a website, and I'll make sure that I'll send you a note. And what she understood was if you do repetition like that, is that people, our brains, or whatever you choose to call consciousness, will try to make sense of things, especially in the repetition. And then we will hallucinate words that actually aren't there. Now, that was one of the things I taught a university class about this for 2 semesters. And they were all shocked when I played this tape of exactly what I was going on about, except in her language. And everybody, and people were actually fighting with each other, saying, no, she didn't say that. I heard this. The truth of the matter, people heard something, but they filled in the gap, so to speak, and it actually isn't there. You make it up, if I'm making sense there.
Yeah.
So that research is very solid, and I can point you in that direction. Unfortunately, right now, I've got, I wish I had it handy, but it's important to say. Now, the second point is what's called binaural beats. I think you might be referring to that too as well, especially with white noise, pink noise, green noise, black, whatever you choose to call it. But the key thing is frequency. So if you present two frequencies, let's just say for the sake of conversation, 40 hertz, which is interesting in terms of binding cognition, and 62 hertz. One ear hears 40 hertz, and the other ear hears 62 hertz. What's the significance of that? What will people hear?
I think you get
Gabrielle, I'll start with you. Or, sorry, it's Gabrielle's turn. Jody.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I'm not sure what you would hear. Would it be like one would have like more of a, I don't even know how to say it, more of a
Well, you'll hear the addition or subtraction of those two frequencies, 40 hertz and 62, I think I said. Now I'm going to go to Jody. What would you be hearing?
I believe you would hear a panning from the left to the right, like almost like a warble, like it's...
Yes.
You'd be hearing 12 hertz.
Oh, you meant very specifically. Sorry. Right over my head. Sorry.
No. Don't apologize, right? What you're talking about, that's the ping pong effect.
Yeah.
I can create that as well, too. So a lot of the other work I do is in soundscapes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. One of my pieces is in competition this month at the International Radio Drama Festival in Canterbury, UK. And I'm doing precisely what you're talking about. I've introduced pulses that creates that kind of ping pong effect. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually using Morse code in English. So they asked me, what's the language of transmission? I said, Morse code and English. So that's the art part. And I want to say to the listener, let the art guys go to where you're not comfortable to go. If you're a scientist, work with art people, work with crazy people like me, because I can fall flat on my arse and it won't matter. You might lose your grant if you do the things that I do in some cases. So feed me your crazy ideas, scientists, right? And we'll work with them, okay? Because we can. And same thing with Jody and Gabrielle. These are nice people. I've reviewed their work, and I think they're ready for an adventure. Have I got that right?
Yes.
I think so. I think we've tapped into something very recently that's taking us in this direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, especially since you're in America, let me say this. God bless America. I mean this in all sincerity. If there's anywhere in the world where entrepreneurs can do their heart's content, and yeah, there's problems, we know these things, right? But there's nowhere else in the world that you can do what you can do. Just write that down. As crazy as it will get, okay? Mm-hmm. There's no other place in the world like what you have. It's precious. Hang on to it. It's working with people with ideas and ideals. Do not suppress yourself. Follow where the rabbit is going.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the rabbit hole gets a little strange, but, that's part of the territory.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is.
So back to what you were talking about earlier. That research, again, has been done by curious scholars in reliable institutions and reputable institutions. And they were able to do these things more often than not because as kids or as youngsters or as young scientists, they were puzzled by these anomalies, but they had to wait until they had sufficient gravitas to be able to ask these crazy questions. I'll just repeat what I was saying earlier. I can't tell you how many times this has happened, is that, Don or scientists, you were right in the end about this crazy thing you were talking about. You were right about this. But this new stuff, this is too nuts. You just please don't go there. And it turns out to be, think about that. It turns out to be a revolution in science, just completely changing our way of understanding how things go. This generation that you comprise, you're kind of in the middle, right? Is a generation that has never, ever known a place without the internet. And very soon, you might be the generation that no longer has to have a keyboard to be able to input. Now that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
What do we mean by literacy? Now, that's a question I have. So what do we mean by scientific literacy? Now, the scientific literacy that you and I have been talking about, Gabrielle and Jody, and you, dear listener, was often co-opted. You mentioned native. and others who claim the authority to speak on behalf of something. Well, this is really interesting right now. Is going on about the United States being a great place for entrepreneurs. At the time, when Wilbur and Orville Wright were bicycle mechanics in Ohio, if they had been in Europe, they would not have been allowed to pursue the idea of mechanized flight, because the academies in Europe claimed that the only people who could investigate these things had to be part of the academy. Do you see where I'm going with this? This is the time for people with ideas and ideals to step up, and let's see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to put it into that perspective.
We have the freedoms to do what we want here,
Right.
So
yeah, don't beat up on yourselves, folks. Okay, all right. This is a trying time. Yeah. But at the same time, don't get co-opted into this binary. It is possible to say that both choices are worse. I've said that before. But it doesn't mean you have to be involved in that. I mean, we need to be involved because we're involved. But what I'm getting at, this is a fantastic time. It's almost like there are no rules. And in some cases, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I get a little annoyed when people drive on the wrong side of the road, but you have to learn that. You go to the UK and they're on the wrong side of the road. What's wrong with these people? Why do they drive on the left? I don't get this. But anyway, you think they would have learned a few things by now. But do you know why they drive on the left in the UK?
I don't think I do.
I don't think so either, no.
No, and it's curious. Okay, so are you right-handed, Gabrielle?
Yes.
Are you right-handed, Jody?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so now picture yourself on a horse with a sword in your right hand, and you're facing off at an opponent.
Okay.
That's why they drive on the left.
That makes sense.
All right. It was culture. It was how, and you have to, remember I was going on about 20 minutes ago, you have to frame things in the reference of the culture at the time, like religion means to bind community. So we're in a different space right now. Who says we need to have either people on the left or right when we have robot driving cars in a grid, in a G6 grid that already know where all the cars are? Who said we have to line up in these directions? And when we have robot cars, who said that? We actually don't need to do that anymore, but we just do out of convenience to culture.
Right.
But what would happen if we didn't? Well, first off, let's just take that a step further. Let's say that you wanted to drive your car, physically drive it. You would have to pay 10 times more insurance. Why? Because you're a liability. The robots don't crash into cars. Now, how do we know this? This is really weird. Do you ever watch Starlings? You're fascinated with how do they turn like they turn? Like, is there a group mind going on there? These Starlings, they flipping around. Well, if you know about the Champs-Élysées, that's that big, arch in Paris, France, that thing, right? I had the misfortune in 1992, we were doing a TV documentary, and I was driving the car because the camera guy I was working with, I had to give him a break. And I entered into the Champs-Élysées, which has no lines. It's a circle. It's like a roundabout. And I entered into it, and I was terrified. And then I realized that everybody else was terrified too. And so we all kind of made our way, right? Like starlings to the exit. It was kind of a kind of weird group mind. And I'm going, oh, that's interesting. I had to let go and give myself to the group per se, because the moment I had to think about it, I probably would have crashed into something.
Those are those mirror neurons, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got that there.
Yeah.
So our science is telling us things that we need to catch up with where our science and engineering is taking us. We don't need to drive cars anymore in urban grids. We don't need to do that. If you have the latest EV, which is connected, if you have a Tesla, as you probably already know, the car's cheap, the software is expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're of the age, you're going to see this. I bet. I'm making a prediction here. But the question is when. And I think it might happen sooner than later. There's another point. Why does everybody have to own a car? that sits in the garage for 22 hours a day.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, where we live personally, like, we don't have public transportation in Northeast PA. It's not here. You have to go to New York City.
But you actually do. I'm giving you, like, look at you guys. I bequeath this to you. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. You get a fleet of cars that are restricted to operate in only a grid that you make up in the town or village or city that you live in. It's just like in London, England. Cab drivers can only work within a certain, or New York for that matter, New York City. They only work in a very prescribed area. They know that area like the back of their hands. In fact, in London, England, to take the test requires a prodigious memory, and most people fail before they get their license to operate. Not so much in New York where you have to get a medallion, so to speak. But what I'm getting at, if you have public transit reimagined as transit that you call up on your phone and the car picks up and takes you to where you want to go. That's a different kind of model than some city hall guys.
I see. So it's basically a fleet.
Yeah, you see what I'm getting at. This is and this is where the science tells us we're already at. We can actually do this now.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah, well, we limit ourselves.
We do.
I think you just invented a business for yourself.
Yeah.
And the smaller the community, the better, if you think about it, or a neighborhood. I mean, let's face it. If you're living in a city, let's just say you were. Let's say you were living in Boston. Okay, let's say you were. When was the last time you went to the end of the Charles River in Boston? Most people won't even know what you're talking about. Okay? They live in their quadrants. In some cases, they might be living in Harvard Square, and you don't need a car, or you can jump on transit. We don't live in the entirety of the city.
Right.
If you do, that's amazing. That's what I'm trying. We tend to live in our neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods tend to. And this is where it gets interesting as well. Is it never seems to extend more than maybe 10 kilometers or 6 miles away from where you would constitute the center of where you live. And the reason for that also is interesting, is that was the amount of travel time a horse could be expected to do in one day. 6 miles out and 6 miles back.
Social engineering.
So that's right. And why I'm leading that is our bodies are still living in the 19th century per se. You were saying this yourself. We're still not adjusting well to light. Our bodies are still very old, and they're not catching up to the modernity of what our devices are doing. And what our devices are doing to our bodies, we're making up as we go along. So we should start to track that, I would say, especially with some of the things I just talked about. So this is a great time to be alive, especially if you're young.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting to see, like, even from being a child, I'm sure even more so for you, to see the changes that have gone on since, like, childhood and adolescence up until today. Oh,
yeah. Well, you see, when you hear my empathy for the American experience and just, all truth to tell, half my family is from New York City, and the other half is in Canada. And the reason had to do with the end of the Second World War. My mother and her sister were refugees, as you could say. They closed the internment camps, or they were called displaced person camps. My mother and her sister were Polish, and they told them, everybody go home now. And so her sister, well, to go home for my mother would be going to the Russian enclave, and that was not going to happen, because already the stories were coming out about how miserable it was for the people who did go back home to Poland. Her sister, meantime, had married and was a war bride, American lieutenant, as it turns out, from New York City. So when I was growing up, and I want to go back to what you're saying, in 1965, I was with my cousin Anthony at the New York World's Fair. He was older than me. And my aunt said, meet us here at this spot at 5 o'clock. And we were there like all week, every day. We had full run of the New York World's Fair at 65. So I saw the future then of what was being proposed at that time. And at the same time, my cousin Anthony and other friends, they would come up to where I was living in Northern Ontario in a mining town, Sudbury as it turns out, and they would spend their summers by the lake and sort of genteel and avoid the winter. So I've got this kind of split sense of what the future might have been. And I would say that some of the things that the future was proposed at the New York World's Fair one was animatronics. The Disney Corporation, as we understand it today, had a animatronics of Lincoln, President Lincoln, coming out and giving a speech. And that was incredible. But then again, on the other animatronics was It's a Small World, which I think to this day, to this day is running, I think, either in Florida or California.
It's in Florida.
Yeah, we saw all this stuff that proposed a future that was bright and shiny and progressive and all those words, and conveniently ignored the fact that we're humans and we're competitive, and that sadly, war brings out the best in technology.
Yeah.
And everything's for sale.
Yeah, you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So this current situation that we find ourselves in right now, like Gulf War I, if I could talk about that, nobody had seen ever before because nobody had access to GPS. And that was Gulf War I. That was the announcement of that. What we're seeing in this current conflicts are robots, AIs, and drones, which is interesting. And to be announced, we have no idea what's coming up. But I can assure you, based on the history of war, we're about to witness something that nobody has ever seen before. That's not to create anxiety. That's just to be alert to the changes that we'll be living with over the next while.
Yeah, I think everybody's quite alert to that, yeah.
Yeah. One of them will be extreme surveillance, though. So let me just give you one more T-shirt. The best place to hide something is out in the open. I'll say that again. The best place to hide something is out in the open.
Yeah.
The question then becomes, in the query string, right? What are you looking for? And that's it. And what often has occurred in the history of surveillance is they were staring at it, what they were looking for, but because it didn't match the concept of what they were looking for, they couldn't see it. So I want to go back to with the paranormal stuff, right? I think you've seen this is rock solid science, the gorilla in the suit on a basketball court. Have you seen that video?
Yeah.
Right. Just for the listener, what it is you're instructed to watch the basketball being dribbled by a group of athletes who are moving around in a circle. Am I being accurate on this, Gabrielle?
Yeah.
Is that how you remember it? And then what happens as we're watching extreme focus, extreme attention on the basketball being dribbled, what happens, Gabrielle? Do you remember?
A gorilla walks in the background.
A gorilla in a gorilla suit, okay, does what?
They walk by.
Walks right in between them, dribbling the ball.
Yes, that's right.
Why didn't you see it is the question.
Because you're so hyper-focused.
Exactly. So my point is the AIs, okay, aren't hyper-focused. They have no value system. It's like money. They don't have a personality. Money only goes to where it flows best. Money is not bad or evil. Human beings make it bad or evil. Money just goes as a placeholder. The same thing with the AIs. And if you can't see what you're not looking for, therein lies the problem. Yeah. So now you see why the paranormal research needs to be better funded?
Oh, yeah, absolutely agree.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is it's not seen as science.
Right. And it has no like baseline to operate out of. There's no like contextual framework on how to operate within the field. Everyone just does their own thing.
Well, that's certainly true because there isn't like, there has been, but there's places like Princeton, the Paralab with Robert Jung. These places have been dismantled, largely because of funding. But let's be very honest with one another, if we can be, and you don't have to say this is an old man talking to younger people, is we've gone through a period of suppression and fascism, and that was, mind you, all done in the name of progressiveness. But DEI or DIE, depending on your point of view, has suppressed a number of people just the ability to ask a question in a university setting. Now, you can go on like you do, dear listener, and say, well, do you mean you support this, that, and the other thing? That's not what I'm talking about. That if science is the pursuit of the unknown, then there's no such thing as a bad question, is there?
No.
What there is measurement. And what Michael Persinger and others did was they asked a series of questions, and sometimes they found out what they found out, and you can say, oh, good thing we didn't go any further with this. This leads into a brick wall.
Right.
Yeah, you see what I'm getting at?
But you have to go there to find that out.
Yep.
Exactly. Now we're completely on the same page, so to speak. But when you have a group of people claiming to speak on behalf, this is no different than Cotton Mather. No different. It's the same movie, just a different ending.
Yeah.
And it always ends up bad. So it's always it's like L.A. Confidential, the movie. All the actors are bad in that movie. We don't need to go there. Okay. Look, the actors are good. It's the characters that are bad. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. So that's where we sit at this moment here in 2026. We have some choices to make, especially with our hardware, the machines. Whether these machines are going to be taken away from us, meaning guardrails or government saying pulling the plug, I have no idea. But right now, just to say that T-shirt, nothing is forbidden, everything is permitted until it isn't.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know how much time you have left, but I've had a question burning in my mind for a long time.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
It has to do with the Schumann resonance.
Yes. Well, the Schumann resonance, as you know, was discovered by a guy named Schumann.
Yeah.
And the best way to put it is think of yourself in an envelope, but it's circular. And if you put yourself on the surface of the planet, that envelope, you're inside that envelope. And it's resonating at a very specific, it's a warble, it's got a specific frequency, but it warbles a bit. Okay. Now, at this point, I don't know what I'm talking about in the sense that we haven't completely explored this, but I'll speculate.
Okay.
Is it possible that the Schumann resonance, which is an electromagnetic spectrum, contains information, contains data? Is that possible? Might be. After all, this conversation that we're having right now is over an AirPod that I have in my right ear, and my voice is being transmuted into a transducer, which sends it by Bluetooth to my phone, which then sends it to you in a variety of ways, and it's transduced on your end, and you hear me. And all along the way, data packets of data are moving back and forth, and we think nothing of it. Why? Because we had to learn since telegraphy in the 1850s of how to what we call multiplex information. Am I getting too complex here? Because the next one is perhaps the most important thing that I have to say about the speculation.
No, I don't think so.
Nope, I'm on the same page.
Okay, so back on the early days of telegraphy, using copper wire. Copper is very conducive to what I'm about to talk about. There was no such thing as multiplexing. What happened was you went on one end, the Morse code telegraph guy would code, you go da 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 whatever, okay? And you would have to wait for the other guy on the other end of the line to acknowledge it and then send back. Now you can see that that's really slow, and as a business, you're not going to be making a lot of money unless you're charging a lot of cash. So what they discovered was multiplexing. What was discovered that you could send more than one conversation at a time by adjusting the frequency. Mm-hmm. So instead of going da 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 da, you go da 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 da, etc. And they could all go at the same time as long as you were agreed on one handshake of the frequency that you're engaging with the other side, all going back and forth on one wire, multiplexed conversations. Am I still being clear here, or is this?
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. Multiple broadcasts all at the same time, but
right.
The receiving end is receiving at a different frequency, so it's separated at that point.
Yeah, and this is analog. Okay, the key piece is it's analog. Okay, so the Schumann resonance may contain information, or it may not. It depends on what frequency you're tuned into, or maybe no frequency. Now, when I talk to Native American elders about these things that I did, and all this stuff is available if you track my name and look at Leroy Little Bear. Who's he? He used to be he was at Harvard, actually, and he was the chair of Native Studies at one time. And he came back into the Southern Prairie here on the Blackfoot Reserve. This is north of the Blackfeet Reserve in Montana. And he took me to a place which I did in the 360 piece, by the way, that you can use for VR, virtual reality headsets. More blah, blah, blah. So I better cut to the chase here, Don. We were at a place called Writing on Stone. Writing on Stone. It's a remarkable spot on the Milk River in southern Alberta. And it contains miles and miles of petroglyphs. These are impressions pecked out in the sandstone. But more important, you remember when you're watching the Roadrunner cartoon on TV with Bugs Bunny and stuff like that? The Roadrunner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you remember in the desert, they'd have these, these tabletop type structures in the desert?
Yeah.
And the Roadrunner would run by? Okay, so imagine that, if you will, and there's a persistent wind that comes out of the Rocky Mountains nearby. It never stops. And what he pointed out to me is that in this Writing on Stone place, it actually hums with the wind in a frequency, and it's in the key of D. And the key of D is interesting for people who are I've just noticed a bunch of people's eyebrows going up. The key of D, you say, that's a sacred frequency to some people, that it brings about noetic or liminal experiences, or all that other fancy language meaning spiritual. And that's what he was pointing me toward, is that the actual petroglyphs were not to be revered, so to speak. It's kind of like a stop sign, is that, or X marks the spot, or turn left here to hit the turnpike, or I-95. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. These are markers, but not always. I have to be very careful about that. It's marking with something that's going on in the environment. Another spot nearby, as it turns out, also has what we will call a medicine wheel by contemporary standards, again, laid out along the prairie, and it hums as well, too, with standing waves. And I've recorded those things, 15 years ago. My goodness. And that's available on my Bandcamp site. You don't have to pay me. Just listen carefully. And if you want to, that's fine, too. But it's public information. The more, the merrier. Steal it. Take it if you need to. Use it whatever you want to do. So that's a long, long-winded answer to a short question. Well, what it gets down to, human resonance is natural. It engulfs all human beings on the planet, and it resonates. So whenever the sun behaves badly, as I said earlier, and we have an aurora or especially a G2 storm, it will ring the human resonance like a bell, and it will go off. And that's with the warble. And that's actually been measured. Yeah, so I should leave it there. Otherwise, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole.
No, I think that's interesting, even to learn that, like, in nature, we're getting that, that specific resonance to be just happening naturally.
Yeah, and let's face it. How many people do you know have left the Earth's orbit? I mean, let's forget about the International Space Station. It's in near Earth orbit. It's only about 200 miles up. How many people have you had go to the moon?
Not very many.
Exactly, very few. And what we learned, we are living on a giant magnet. The Earth's core, as it moves, is a magnet. It's generating. And we are living like peach fuzz on the peach fuzz of the planet. We know as human beings, if we go too deep on the ocean's floor, we don't do very well. We also know if we go up to the top of mountains, like Everest, yeah, some people can do it. These are exceptional people like we talked about before. But almost always they come back changed. How do we know this? We've actually measured the changes in people, for example, at the International Space Station. They come back different. Their physiology has been altered. So all of this talk about going to Mars might be stupid because our bodies can't take it. And if our bodies change with gamma rays, for starters, we also know that cognition changes. And that's a fact. That's our science knows this. So I said to a group of scientists, as I mentioned earlier, I was invited to give a talk in Moscow at the Institute for Mathematical Problems of Biology. There is such a thing. I won't say it in Russian. And I was there, a representative of the lab there. And I said to these assembled scientists, I said, well, look, I know that Russia, this is 2017, has the aspiration to go to Mars, because that's what they did. That was what the whole space program was about. The space race in the 1950s and 60s was eventually to go to Mars, first the moon. And here we are again. But I said to them, look, what we've learned along the way, especially this institute, you've learned a bunch of things. And you know that if you're going to send a crew to Mars, and it's going to take a few months, that one of the members of your crew should be a shaman. eyebrows up, pencils down. What does he mean by this? I said, well, as you know, as the physiology of people in space is going to be bombarded with all kinds of things, some of which we don't know anything about. But we do know that people behave differently, and they come back different just from the International Space Station. Not a big difference, but different. And sometimes behaviors are problematic as well, too. One of the dark secrets of the Russian space program, as it turned out, was a lot of their cosmonauts, and they were in really crazy conditions, came back, and they had serious problems with depression. I'm talking about, like bipolar disorders, almost that problematic.
Wow.
And so I'll cut to the punchline. I said, yeah, so you should be sending a shaman on the crew to Mars. And why? Because a shaman knows how to be lucid inside a hallucination.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't it, though?
Yeah.
So, again, paranormal research has gravitas now that we should be able to investigate without all the other noise and nonsense associated with it, if we want to go off planet.
Yeah.
Now, I have no doubt our machines are going to go off planet. In fact, I think it's going to happen. Our robots, whatever you choose to call them, will be endowed with our aspirations. And maybe those robots will need a Genesis story about where they came from, as where they go out in space. But there are some very serious people that I've talked to that suggest that we're the robots, human beings, that have been sent off. But I'll leave that for another conversation.
I've considered something similar to that myself.
Well, there you go. It's okay. It's safe here. You can talk about it. Besides, this is your show. You can do whatever you want. What else would you like to talk about? Or we can do this again if you wish.
My brain is spinning right now, to tell you the truth.
Well, maybe it's time to sit down a bit and quick, and have a cup of coffee and, think about the spring. Think about the spring. No snow, flowers are blooming, that kind of thing. Yeah. I'm adding slowly but surely. Some of the hardware that I've had, I recorded conversations, everything from analog audio tape to audio cassettes to digital audio tape, which sadly, I've had some problems with that. Mini discs, Sony mini discs, if anybody remembers these things.
Oh yeah.
It's the whole other, and then I got CD rot, and I had to recover some things. And the beauty about it for me was the tools that I have now, like Adobe Enhance, for example. As podcasts, you should probably be aware of this. Adobe Enhance can take just about any rotten conversation, I'm talking about technical, and bring it up to broadcast standard. And so I've been using these tools selectively, and in some cases reconstructing conversations that basically have fallen apart. And I'm happy to do that because I realized I was privileged at the time, just to take things into a circle, is that people were taking the stories I was telling seriously, because at the time the veneer was, I was working at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, your version of National Public Radio, which has a certain gravitas. If I was just, Dawn on the corner going on like I do, it would have just been more noise. Let's put it this way. Of the 25 to 30 years of Coast to Coast, what remains?
The recordings.
Yeah.
But what sticks? Audience has diminished from 14 million to whatever. It's still an impressive audience, don't get me wrong. But it was a lot of entertainment there, and he used that. I give him great credit for this as a means to get other information out there. But I don't think we need the entertainment anymore. And I think that's where you and I, Gabrielle and Jody, we agree.
Yeah, definitely.
Trying to get there.
Yeah. We have to get out of the box.
Well, if I can, let me put it to you this way. If I can be helpful, tell me what I agreed to.
Okay.
All right.
I hear this say, what does he mean by that? We don't know yet.
Well, you're a philosopher. I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about the research that we're looking into with trying to reconnect to that, divine, for lack of a better word, aspect that we've lost in the darkness?
Well, what I'm getting at is the reason why we're having this conversation is because it helps you get past the things you don't have to look into.
Okay.
In other words, as a resource, every generation, it's actually known. I'm not suggesting everybody needs to be a Roman Catholic. That's not what I'm saying. But in Roman Catholicism, there is Pope Gregory. Yes, Pope Gregory. You know the guy with the Gregorian chants?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But what is less well known, and maybe I've got my Catholicism wrong here, is something called apologetics. Apologetics. And it doesn't mean everybody falls down on their face and begs for forgiveness. Or it's apologia. What it means is that there's a set of stories that every generation needs to know. We will call it the perennial wisdom. And it's the obligation of every generation thereafter to tell that stories to the generation that's coming up. Our issue right now, and I think this is where you're coming from, is we chose to reject these stories and found, as it turns out, there was truth to these stories, that they were being told in the best way possible, given their circumstances and the technology available. Whether it's rock art, meaning pictographs and petroglyphs carved into the side of mountains, or for that matter, caves. People, human beings, were saying, and let's just think about that for a moment, just for a second more. I'm going to add just one more thing here, a piece of the action. I had the luxury of speaking to Jung. Who's he? He's the chief archaeologist for France. And he was in the Chauvet Caves, which was discovered in the last century. And Werner Herzog did a film with Jean-Claude called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams. But my conversation was before that with Jean-Claude. There's a film I did about this, and I can point people toward that later. And Claude said to me that stopped me in my tracks. Let's remember, friends, that the people who were doing the cave art, they were trained artists. These people were trained. They were chosen people. And that the people who chose them had to work hard as hunter-gatherers to give them the resources to do that art. This is amazing, that peoples who are doing hunter-gathering, set aside resources that it was important for them to record these memories. I think we're in a similar position, but different at our time. And that's why we do need to support artists, not activists. There's a difference. If an artist comes to you and you don't understand what they're talking about, that's good. That means they're onto something new.
Right.
If an activist comes up to you and tells you to pick a side, that's not art.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I know it's tough right now, folks. Support the artists. Science and artists need to work together now. This is our time. Now, it's Sunday when we're talking. You can see why I'm evangelizing here. But at the same breath, I sincerely believe that it's been a rewarding life for me. Very rewarding. And our job, if you choose to accept it, is to be explainers to people who don't completely understand what those other guys are going on about. We've got our feet in both places. Sometimes you get mistaken for the enemy. That's true.
Right.
Because we're so far out ahead. But our job is to explain things to people who want to understand. Activists don't want to understand. They just want to be fascists and control you. Forget about those guys. This too will pass. It's part of our natural human history. It comes up over and over and over and over and over again. But the good news, like spring, winter eventually goes away.
Right.
Well, there's a positive note I struck there. Holy moly.
Well, I'm just hoping that the AI doesn't take the artists away, because I think artists are something that we need, because they are creators.
Yeah.
There's something that's inspired there. So.
Yeah. And remember the discrimination. I can do this because I get arts grants and I use them, but I also work with scientists. Okay. Mm. But at the end of the day, there's a huge discrimination in my mind between activists and artists. Huge. I support the artists. I don't support activism of any sort at this point, because it just leads to people just yelling at each other. They can't hear each other because everybody's too busy yelling.
It's not
this
productive.
is where the art guide comes in. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's crazy. I don't want Gabrielle to do this. Okay, Jody, just play with me for a minute. Say something really obnoxious to me, like the worst thing you ever heard from an activist. Just do that for fun. You can edit this out if you need to.
The worst thing.
Say something.
Oh, it's terrible. I don't want to yell at you. You've been such a great guest, but Is that a dog
You
barking?
can't even just bark back at them because that's what it's barking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
It's
unexpected.
not conversation. It's not dialogue.
No, it's not productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
So what you have to do is get completely absurd. And then when I've done that to people, they break out into a smile when they realize just what happened. And that's what I also wanted. We need to be a little lighter. We need humor.
Yeah, we definitely do.
It's the human condition. It's a bit of a joke. I'm not talking about we need to be a Samuel Beckett play, Waiting for Godot. That's pretty tough. That's intense. but at the same time, maybe more Marx Brothers. If it's going to be Marx 2.0, let it be Groucho Marx. Okay?
Yeah.
Then again, I don't know. I suppose you could fire me right now, and we'll see what happens. See, you got it, right? And I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to. That's how it's set up, right? Now, I should leave you with this thought. Michael Persinger had a tremendous sense of humor. And he would use what I just did, all the cultural references, to bring people into the tent that they were scared to enter into, because it might hurt their reputations, maybe it'll have an impact on their careers. I'm happy to report that a lot of the progeny of Michael Persinger's group are in not just labs in the world of substance, they're actually making a difference. Narosha Morgan, for example, has just had a paper recently brought into Science, that little newspaper of record for science, and Nature as well. And they're advancing these ideas, but they're doing it scientifically. And I would point you in that direction as well, as where the progeny is. And whom they're teaching and they're working with, that's the generation that's probably going to have the most fun, because they'll have the most toys to play with that we simply didn't have even 10 years ago.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so my question to you is, Gabrielle?
Yeah?
You can do anything you want in the world. I've made you queen of the matrices. Any mathematicians out there, you can do anything you want. But it's only one thing. What would it be?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, then next time we talk, I want an answer.
Okay.
Jody, you heard the question. I just made you supreme ruler of the multiverses, but you can only do one thing. What would that be? And we should talk again.
Yeah, I got to think about that.
Yeah, we should definitely talk again.
And that's what I'm saying. I want you to think about these things. We said a lot of things here today. We've been going on for almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we don't want to scare people because, there's too much information. Remember, I've been living in this soup, so to speak, since the early 90s, meaning the 1990s. I didn't expect to be here, but this is where it led.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Sometimes it finds you.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought you'd appreciate that sentiment. Yeah. All right. What else should we talk about before we go away? Or I go away, anyway.
I mean, we had a list of questions here, but we didn't see it going this way. And I mean, it's been very informative.
Yeah, really interesting.
Well, I'm taking you seriously, okay? And I should also say that Michael Persinger, if you came to him with a serious question and you had worked upon it and you thought about it, he didn't dismiss it. If he heard an experiment that could be done, he would say these 4 words: sounds like a plan. And then they would do it. Okay? Then they would do it. If you came to him with some frivolous thing, that you haven't really thought about, just threw it against the wall to see if it would stick, you wouldn't have much time with Michael Persinger. And you would be dismissed. Sometimes he was thought to be curt. He didn't suffer fools, and he certainly didn't have time for stupid people. I'll say that much. But for some reason, we got along extraordinarily well. We had a lot of fun. Most of our conversations were between 2 and 4 in the morning, by the way.
Oh, wow.
And that's where you're hearing these conversations that are recorded. Was they were uninterrupted. We could go on like we do at that time in the morning. And so I'm saying to all you folks that get up in the middle of the night, let's go back to what Gabrielle was saying earlier. There's a reason for this. It's the wee hours that bring about the best conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, dear listener, and it's 3:00, stop the screaming, for God's sake. And it happens, right? You know, in the middle of the night, you come up with an idea. That's it. And you wake up the neighborhood, right? What's wrong with this guy?
Oh, yeah.
But it's important.
Yeah.
And this is the time for questions. It's the time for, if you hear something you don't understand, ask the question. What do you mean by that? More wars and more differences between people have largely culturally arisen because the other side didn't understand what they meant by the word that they're talking about. Like we read earlier, like religion, to bind community. Well, how can you be against that?
Right.
Extremist, progressive person, you know? Or like I said, Marx 2.0. How can you be against Groucho?
Yeah.
That's my favorite reference, right?
Right.
And that's where we're stumbling. We're stumbling all over right now is we're not honestly talking to one another and say, well, what do you mean by whatever the word that you were triggered by? And then you go, oh, I don't mean that at all. I meant X or Y or Z. Now, in my country, I would have said Z.
Yeah.
See what I'm getting at?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's all ideology. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And your work is important. I'm letting you know this, okay? Don't ever think it isn't.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's appreciated.
You're stumbling your way forward. I get it. Been there, right?
Right.
But ask the old guys. The old guys like me will be happy to let you know, well, you can try that, kids, but Jesus, you know, I already fell down the stairs and bounced my head. Or, oh, we saw this, but we didn't know what was going to happen next. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
If you were like 17 or 16, let's say.
I think we lost him. Don't forget to check us out at podcastoftheparanormal.com. You can find links to our social media, links to our episodes. You could stream right from the website, or you could listen at your favorite podcast provider. If you want to come on the show, use our contact form, or you can email us at contact@podcastoftheparanormal.com.
You know, we hit the exact 2-hour mark, and the phone hiccuped. Interesting.
Is that what happened? Are you serious? Oh, my God.
I'm serious. It was exactly 2 hours.
That is strange.
We're not doing this anymore.
Yeah, wow.
I didn't want you to think I hung up on you.
Oh, no, I'm so used to technology. Back in the old days, we used to do what's called the Daily Miracle. I'll give you an example. I'd be sitting in my studio in Toronto, and we've linked to another studio, maybe in New York or another around the world, and do what we're doing right now, which is you just pick up the phone and dial. But we had to coordinate satellites.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Like, this is what I'm saying. This is a fantastic time to be curious, alive, and having the resources. And that was expensive. And if you missed the window for the satellite time, you would get cut off, and there's no way you could reconnect.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the end of the conversation. So that's how it was. And then we had, when I was doing television, especially what we called eyewitness news at the time, we had close to 50 people, 50 people, working on that show during the day for a 1 hour daily miracle, we called it. And now it's 2 people in the control room, another guy in front, going on about the world. That's it, 3 people. And so there's no excuse now for upping the game. And so that's what I'm getting at with you folks. Up the game. If I can be helpful, I'm an old broadcaster, but I know how to get audience, etc. You might want to expand your footprint. That's what I'm trying to get at. Conversations like these might be helpful, or they could be a nuisance. So think about it, and then get back to me. Tell me what you want to do, and let me be helpful, okay?
Okay, yeah, definitely. I appreciate that.
I like what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Don.
Yeah, I know you do, because people in Pennsylvania always do. They do I mean, after all, it's close to Ontario. What the heck?
Yeah, we're close enough.
Yeah. It's still lousy weather anywhere you count it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Now, I forgot to say one thing. Have you been to New Hampshire lately?
When was the last time we were there?
I think the farthest we did go to New Hampshire.
Yeah,
we went to New Hampshire in 2024, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to suggest this, okay? Because you don't support some of the stuff I'm talking about beforehand. Because at this point, it's just the 3 of us talking. If it's recording, that's fine too. The birthplace of Mary Baker Eddy is in New Hampshire.
Oh, I love Mary Baker Eddy.
Yeah. She's a Christian scientist. She talked about animal magnetism. What is less well known is where she grew up is just rocked with geophysical faults. She was a sickly child. She couldn't get out of the house much. And she's in an area, I actually went there. And if you find yourself, now I'm not suggesting that this is going to happen. I'm just saying, if you find yourself in that area, you can go to the house. You can actually go right up to the house.
Oh, wow.
It's marked. You can't get into it, but you can go up to it. I wasn't interested in what was in the house. I was interested in the geology and the geophysical environment that it was in. And sure enough, I was getting these kinds of, like, when you get a kind of a hair standing on end when you take a balloon and, but I was getting that kind of thing running up and down my left knee or left leg. And that was a sign to me, at least that's my vector, that there's something going on in the environment. Part 2, walk as much as you can. I don't suggest you do this right now because it's winter, barefoot. We tend to be walking around the environment insulated from ground with shoes and stuff like that.
I see.
But most of our ancestors didn't have that kind of insulation, certainly rubber heels. They didn't have that, okay? So a lot of the other information is literally coming up from the ground. If you're familiar with the homunculus, that description of how it looks like a kind of a Mickey Mouse thing.
Yeah.
It shows how human beings take in, okay? So you see really big eyes, right? You see the palms of the hands being very big, but also the bottom of the feet.
Right.
Very, very big. Lots of information. So as much as you can as possible, without getting weird, walk the ground barefoot. Now remember, Mary Baker Eddy was a kid, and chances are she'd be walking around barefoot.
Yeah.
I think we're going to use that.
Now, that's just speculation. I'm not saying there's anything to this. If you go to the locations like I have, and the good people, the taxpayers of Canada, paid me to go around and look into these places. I did lots of documentaries about what's going on in so-called spiritual places all over North America, and in some cases the world. Now, I got lucky, but you make your luck. So you're in a position to make your luck, okay? That's what I'm getting at.
And we actually, oddly enough, Mary Baker Eddy has a library in Boston that houses this really unique globe, the Maparium. That's like the Christian Science church.
Yep, it's the reading room, yeah. And that's what I'm getting at.
We have like the second established Christian Science church here in Scranton. It's our children's library now.
Well, there you go.
Right? So it's like all connected.
There you go.
Oh my God.
So it's interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, it should be because you're living among them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, the point is, the late 19th century, just to reiterate what I was saying earlier, was a time that there was no discrimination by scientists to investigate these kinds of things. What happened is what happened between then and now. But at that time, there's another controversial person and I should mention, I think you'll be very interested in this, Gabrielle, is that most of the leaders in what I'm talking about in the late 19th century were women.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it was Christian, or for that matter, Blavatsky, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, and Theosophy. But do you know why these women were in these positions?
Wasn't it believed that it was easier for the women to connect with the spirits?
Well, that would be one of the things, but they could not get into science. They couldn't go to university. They were discriminated against, but nobody thought anything of women going into what they call religion.
Yeah.
And we forgot about that.
Yeah.
And we've gone through an era of feminism. Nobody in their right mind, including me, will say that women are less than men in terms of intelligence. That's why there's maybe some of the incidents that we see around the world right now. There are theocratic organizations that say, you, Gabrielle, are not my equal. Well, that's just plain dead wrong. Science shows otherwise. But theocracies die hard, or ideas like that. But in the late 19th century, women were discriminated against with rare exceptions, but nobody thought anything of a woman leading a movement in what we would call a religion, or for that matter, what was going on in upstate New York. But that's another conversation. So we need to understand from the frame of history, I would say, how we got to where we are now, what to avoid, what perhaps to include, and what questions remain that perhaps propose, as my good friend Michael Persinger said, sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say, and it's not just Christian Science, by the way. I mentioned Dartmouth College is also the seat of a lot of very interesting things as well in terms of, but that's another conversation. Again, I don't want to take you too far down in these other roads because sometimes they circle back on each other. That's the thing I should warn you against.
Yes.
Is you find yourself going in a kind of a weird circle. But in this instance, it's a spiral. Okay? It's whether it's going up or down, I can't tell you.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it. You're not like circling back, you're kind of spiraling.
Yeah. Moving through a space, and that space is being affected as much as you're effective in it.
Yeah.
And that's, we humans have a lot more control than we think we do. We tend to give away our power to gurus and all this kind of stuff. And I should say a line that Juju Krishnamurti said, R.J. Krishnamurti, who was at one time thought to be the Maitreya. What's that? That's the future Buddha that the Theosophical crowd had identified this kid as a reincarnate Lama. But Krishnamurti had rejected this. And he became a very good friend of David Bohm, B-O-H-M, who was a great physicist in the 20th century. And his work stands up, among other things. Anyway, Krishnamurti was being interviewed by Jeffrey Mishlove, who's had a wonderful show. He has another show called Thinking Aloud, which used to be on PBS. And I think there's some new editions of it. So Jeffrey Mishlove was a graduate, the only graduate, a PhD program, I think it was with Canada University or something like that, in what we would call parapsychology. And so Jeffrey Mishlove is interviewing Krishnamurti, and he says, Krishnamurti, you, of course, are the great guru. And Krishnamurti sort of darts up, I'm doing this from memory, and he says, no, definitely, I am not the guru. The guru is you. You are the guru. Now, what could he possibly mean by that? It means that we have everything in us to answer any question you might have, but you might not like the answer. So we give away the power.
Right.
Spooky, huh?
Yeah.
And so when you're looking into what you're looking into, let's not forget that some of the tools that we're talking about, all we've done now is have a technology of trance states, a technology of trance to break the consensus trance. This is Charles Tart's work. Again, a transpersonal psychologist who just died 2 years ago. But his work is important. He was at the University of California at Davis. I got to thank you, too, for talking to me like this. It's because it brings back a bunch of memories I thought I had forgotten, but here they are. So I thank you for that. And it's a bunch of stuff I talked about today I haven't talked about in years. Thank you.
Thank you for talking to us.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really do.
Well, let's see where this goes. How's that?
Yeah, definitely.
If you want to come to Canada, you're welcome. You know that, eh?
Yeah, we got to get a passport,
yeah,
huh?
We'd love to go to Canada.
Yeah. Still don't have a passport.
Yeah, well, whatever, but it's increasingly difficult for people like me to go into America.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How arguably I get into America? Well, I can get into it. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Is I don't have to be in New York to be a broadcaster anymore. Mm-hmm. I can do just what I'm doing right now,
right.
as much as you can do that here, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is propagate this far and wide. Encourage people to steal it if necessary. I said this earlier. Because these ideas are the perennial wisdom. Yeah. It's just our turn to tell people what we already learned from our elders. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. That's a good, don't reinvent the wheel. Just kind of, learn what's already been done and how can you improve and build on it.
And this will make you happy, right? It removes the responsibility, the terror. When we're all 18ers, what can I do that hasn't been done 10,000 times before? Well, we reversed it. How can we tell what's done 10,000 times before in the language of our time? In the language of our time. And in the language of our time is technology.
Yeah.
And so it relieves that tension of, drawing attention to yourself. It's like saying, you're not arguing with me, you're arguing with Plato,
Right.
You may be against what I'm saying, but Lincoln said this. Right?
Yeah.
All men are equal. What a concept. Okay. All right. So,
woo is right.
I better have a sip of tea. Yeah. Now, what question do you want me to think about until the next time we talk?
Oh, Gab, you want this one or?
I don't know. I don't even know.
Write something down, okay? Just send it to me, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
I could tell you one right off the cuff right now if you want.
Okay, go for it, yeah.
For whatever reason, and I'm still recording this. I don't know if it's going to end up in the show or not, just to let you know, but I've had...
Yeah, it's all good.
I do a lot of dream work. I solve problems in my sleep. I'm a computer programmer, and I come up with solutions in my sleep. Blessing and a curse, whatever. But I started getting into this stuff and started going down the rabbit hole of, EMF frequencies and low EMF and how that affects the brain and all that.
Yeah.
And I had a dream where I was being told by someone or something how to build a device, which was basically something with a dial that you could change the frequency up or down with the coil on it. And I had no idea what I was being asked to build in this dream. And literally a couple weeks ago, probably around the same time that you contacted us, I found the Schumann resonance generators. And I'm like looking at this thing and I'm like, oh my God, that's the thing. Because I have a dream journal. I do little sketches in there and I write stuff down. So
yeah, I should put you into touch with Kevin Soroka. We did a paper together about this, but I'm going to say something that will be helpful. Okay.
Okay.
And then I mentioned Charles Tart before, and he wrote a seminal college textbook called Altered States of Consciousness. Okay.
Okay.
And you can find it. Now, one of the things that he describes, Charles Tart, was Edison, the inventor, and how he used dreams for his inventions.
Okay.
I think this is an important story because it directly affirms what you just said. Okay. So what Edison used to do, he used to sleep in a chair, but he held in his hand a spoon. And after he gnawed it off, the spoon would hit a pan or something underneath him and would wake him up. And at that point, he would write down whatever he had been dreaming.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So that was how Edison, one of the great inventors of our time, that we have profited from in terms of technology, late 19th century, of course. So that's how he used dreams, or what has been categorized as the liminal space,
right,
as a source of invention. How's that? So this is not a new idea. It turns out that Charles Tart traced it back in Altered States of Consciousness. So he traced it back that this was a common practice, for example, even with meditators and we would call Tibetan Buddhists, etc., including the state oracle. So what's the state oracle? This is a person whose job is to inform the Dalai Lama of future events and stuff like that. Again, in practices that in some cases they put themselves into great deprivation. Now, I don't suggest you do this, but the so-called vision quest, which you've heard about, is often a 48 to 72 hour staying up for 3 days. Mm-hmm. Very little sustenance, okay? And you wait for your vision to come. Well, what is that? Well, if you talk to a physiologist or somebody who's a forensic psychiatrist, they said they were waiting for a hallucination.
Right. Yep.
But what if the hallucination turns out to be a description of a machine as you described?
Right.
And again, that's something you might want to look into.
Yeah.
The dreams are a theater of invention. I don't know. But that's as much as I know and can talk about right now. And what I'll do is I will revisit some of the other research and I'll send it your way. I did do a documentary called Visions and Voices for the CBC. 26 years ago. I'll send you the transcript. How's that?
Sounds great.
Yeah. And then there's a whole bunch. I'll do that after we sign off here. I'll do that right away. What's the best email address to send you this as a PDF?
You could use the same one that you contacted us through the website.
Oh, it'll get to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not going to end up in junk?
No, it'll get to us.
I don't like being in junk. It hurts me when I'm in junk,
I know.
I'm surrounded by all this horrible stuff. Okay. And what about you, Gabrielle? I always called you Gabby, but Gabrielle, what about what would you like me to look at?
I don't know. I just keep going back to like the connection to what we've lost. Like we talked about it too, right? Like around the time that we stopped our biphasic sleep cycle, we started the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. So it was no longer prudent because the factory work started. So it's like there's something we lost there, you know?
But the question is, it hasn't been lost. It hasn't been recorded again.
Oh, yes.
So that's all I'm trying to get. It's still there. It's latent. It's inherent in our physiology, in our humanity.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier in the conversation, William Burroughs, the writer, the beat writer, and his partner, Brian Gysin, B-R-I-O-N, Gysin, G-Y-S-I-N. And Gysin invented something called the dream machine.
Oh, yeah.
If you were listening to Nirvana, yeah. And what that was is basically flashing lights at a very specific frequency, flashing. And you would close your eyes, and basically it was eyes wide shut, not the movie. But and it works. It's no difference if we're still recording here. It's if you're on a train, like an Amtrak train, and you suddenly the sun's shining through, and you go past a grove of trees, and you get that blinking of light.
Yes.
And you're staring into that light. Yeah, and it will induce non-ordinary states of awareness, or visions, or hallucinations. You will see animals. A second thing is that if you next time you go up to Nantucket or somewhere like that, and you see waves coming in, like waves.
Okay.
And some people have said, for example, in Yukon, in close to Alaska, there's a town called Whitehorse, but there are no white horses there. Why would they call it Whitehorse? Because the river, when it flows up, okay, it's got rapids, and the rapids, when you watch them, you begin to anthropomorphize galloping white horses coming out of the rapids. Okay, now that's our humanity, or for that matter, when you look at clouds. Again, Jung, among others, talked about this. Jung. We anthropomorphize clouds. Like right now, the clouds you're looking at. Let's say you're looking at it. Why does it look like a dog? Is it a dog? Well, some human beings way back when said that's the dog spirit.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, but they're seeing something that is triggering a kind of a two-way, two kids with string and tin cans.
Yeah.
It's primitive, but it works, right?
Right.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, once you start to adjust that view, you might be encouraged to think, well, that's the Native American view. You could say, yes, it is, but it's also the view of many other cultures that all arrived at the same place, but from different points along the mountain. So in other words, if you point to the top of the mountain, let's just say you're in Appalachia for whatever reason, on the other valley, they're pointing into the same top of the mountain, but they will call it by something different. All we know is we're pointing at the top of a mountain. Our job is to get to the top of the mountain.
Right.
And then what you see are other mountains to climb.
Yeah.
Oh, poor things. Other mountains to climb. It's all exhausting in the end, Anyhow. And again, that sense of humor is important.
It is.
Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. I'll look into these things. I'll send you stuff. But let's talk again at your convenience.
Yes, I'd love to pick your brain some more.
So I'm giving you the Canadian seal of approval. I'll send down some maple syrup or something. That's the stuff that you do is sticky. And I wish you all the best. And yes, please, let's talk again. If you can, point toward what I'm talking about, and keep subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And remember, you don't have to encourage people to. It's free, but if they do want to send a few bucks now and again, so I can get this new gear, I will take it.
And people can find you. It's donhill.substack.com.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing I'm pointing toward. The other site, that's where I want you to focus like a laser first, and I'll put up the other stuff because I don't want to be a distraction right now. I want this, and tell your friends. I got to bump up the numbers. I've got to get some more subscribers. I've got subscribers right now, and they are helping with the freight, so to speak. But everything that you and I and Jody and Gabriel have been talking about, and I'm including the listener here right now, this is not widely known, at least at this level.
Right.
Everything I'm saying, you can backtrace and say, well, that sounded pretty amazing or weird and stuff like that, but whoa, I didn't know this was happening. That's the key thing. I don't know is the sign of an intelligent person. So let's talk again. I'm going away now. He's actually really leaving now. I'm going away. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
If you made it this far, thank you. We began this journey looking for echoes of the past, but we found ourselves standing on the edge of a much deeper frontier.
It's a lot to process, and we invite you to sit with these possibilities as we do.
In our next episode, we'll continue pulling back the veil, diving into the experiences and perspectives that defy the singular explanations of the past.
Thank you for joining us as we navigate this new chapter.
And remember, the world is far more complex than we once imagined.
As always, thanks for listening.